Rising from the flat expanse of the Somerset levels, Glastonbury Tor is a hill that refuses to be ordinary. It is crowned by the roofless tower of St. Michael, ringed by terraces that spiral toward the summit like the coils of a stone serpent, and wrapped in a reputation that few landscapes on Earth can match. To some, it is simply a striking geological feature, a mound of clay and sandstone left behind by ancient erosion. To others, it is the threshold of Avalon, the resting place of King Arthur, and a point where the visible world thins until something older shows through. This video walks the spiral path upward, tracing the physical ruins, the buried king, and the Celtic stories of Annwn, the otherworld whose gates were said to open in places exactly like this one. The terraces themselves are the first mystery. 7 distinct ledges wind around the slopes, and no one can say with certainty who made them or why. Some researchers argue they are the worn remains of medieval agricultural strip farming, the practical scars of people who needed to grow food on steep ground. Others insist the pattern forms a single continuous labyrinth, a processional route that a pilgrim could once have walked from base to summit in slow ritual ascent. If the second reading is correct, then the Tor is not merely a hill with a ruin on top. It is a vast three-dimensional symbol, a meditation carved into the land itself, and climbing it becomes an act with meaning rather than just exercise. The truth is probably tangled somewhere between farming and faith, which is fitting for a place that has always served sacred and ordinary purposes at once. At the summit stands the tower, all that survives of the Church of St. Michael. An earlier church on this spot collapsed during an earthquake in 1275, and the tower we see today belongs to a 14th century rebuilding that was later dissolved under Henry VIII. The dedication to Michael matters more than it first appears. Across Europe, churches to the archangel tend to cluster on high and dramatic places, on peaks and crags where the divine was thought to do battle with the powers below. Michael is the figure who casts down dragons and guards thresholds, and the early Christians who built here may have been deliberately claiming a site that older beliefs had already marked as charged. They did not arrive at an empty hill. They arrived at a place that people already treated as a doorway, and they sealed it, as they so often did, with a saint. This brings us to the ley lines. In the 20th century, the writer John Michel popularised the idea of the St. Michael line, a long alignment of sacred sites running across southern England, from Cornwall through Glastonbury and onward to the eastern coast. Believers describe such lines as channels of subtle earth energy, invisible currents that the ancients could sense and that they honoured by raising stones and churches along the way. The Tor sits as one of the brightest beads on this thread. Skeptics point out reasonably that with enough monuments scattered across a country you can draw a straight line through almost anything, and that no instrument has ever measured the energy in question. Yet the appeal of the idea is not really about physics. It speaks to an older intuition that the land has structure beneath its surface, that certain points concentrate significance, and that the Tor is one of them. Whether the lines are literal or symbolic, they express the same feeling that the hill has always provoked, the sense of standing at a crossing. No legend clings to Glastonbury more tightly than that of King Arthur. The connection grew firm in 1191, when the monks of Glastonbury Abbey announced an extraordinary discovery. Digging in their cemetery, they claimed to have unearthed a hollowed oak coffin containing the bones of a tall man and a woman with golden hair, along with a lead cross inscribed with words naming the spot as the burial place of King Arthur in the Isle of Avalon. The bodies were later moved to a black marble tomb before the high altar, which vanished during the dissolution of the monasteries. Modern historians treat the find with deep suspicion. The abbey had recently suffered a devastating fire and badly needed money and prestige, and a royal grave drawing pilgrims would have answered both needs perfectly. The timing was, to put it gently, convenient. Still, the legend did not require the monks to invent it. They were tapping a much older association, the belief that Avalon, the misty island where the wounded Arthur was carried to be healed, was Glastonbury itself, in the days when the surrounding lowlands lay flooded, and the Tor stood as a true island rising from the waters. The fairy lore of Glastonbury runs deeper than the postcard image of delicate winged creatures might suggest. In the older Celtic understanding, the fairies were not small or sweet. They were the Tylwyth Teg, The fair folk, a people of the otherworld who could be generous or cruel by turns, and they were bound up directly with Annwn and with Gwyn ap Nudd, the lord said to dwell within the Tor. To the medieval mind, these beings were genuinely dangerous, and the hill was understood as one of their strongholds rather than a charming home for nature spirits. A famous tale makes this vivid. Saint Colin, a hermit who had taken up residence on the slopes, was summoned by Gwyn ap Nudd to a glittering palace at the summit, full of music and feasting and finely dressed attendants. The saint, suspecting an illusion, flung holy water across the hall, and in an instant the whole shining court vanished, leaving him alone on the bare and windswept hilltop. The story carries the old warning in its bones, that the splendour offered by the fair folk is a glamour laid over emptiness, and that those who eat their food or accept their hospitality may never return to the world they knew. What gives the Tor its particular charge in this tradition is the idea of liminal time and space. Fairies were thought to gather where boundaries blur, at dusk and dawn, at the turning festivals of Samhain and Beltane, in mist and at the edges of water. The Tor, an island in the ancient floods and a hill forever wrapped in low cloud, was a boundary made solid, and that made it irresistible to such beings. People spoke of doorways opening in the hillside, of travellers led astray by lights or music, of time slipping, so that an hour spent with the fair folk became 100 years in the ordinary world. Modern Glastonbury has softened much of this, and visitors now leave ribbons and small offerings in a spirit of gentle reverence rather than real fear. Yet the underlying notion has not changed at all. It is the same conviction that animates every other story told about the place, the sense that the veil here is thin, that the hill is inhabited by more than the eye can see, and that those who walk its spiral path should do so with a measure of respect for whatever might be watching from just beyond the edge of sight. That image of the island is the key that unlocks the Celtic layer of the story. In the older mythology of the Welsh and Britons, the otherworld was called Annwn, a realm of feasting and eternal youth, of cauldrons that restored the dead and treasures beyond price. It was not imagined as a distant heaven, but as a place lying alongside our own, reachable through particular doorways. Hills, lakes, mounds and islands were the favoured gateways, and a hill that became an island when the floods came would have been a gateway of the highest order. One tradition makes the Tor the very stronghold of Gwyn ap Nudd, a lord of Annwn and leader of the wild hunt, who was said to ride out from the hill with his spectral hounds. Read this way, the spiral terraces stop being merely a path up a hill. They become the approach to a threshold, the slow, circling descent and ascent that ritual so often demands of anyone seeking to pass between worlds. So the layers settle one upon another, and they do not cancel each other out. The geologist sees erosion and farming. The historian sees a medieval monastery making the most of a useful legend. The Christian pilgrim sees Michael guarding a holy height. The follower of the old ways sees Annwn breathing just beyond the veil. What is remarkable about Glastonbury Tor is that it holds all of these at once without collapsing, because the hill itself is simply there, indifferent and patient, while every age that meets it reads its own deepest concerns into its slopes. King Arthur may not lie buried in the Somerset clay, and no compass will ever swing toward a magnetic portal at the summit. Yet the legends endure, because they answer a need that facts alone cannot, the need to believe that some places are more than the sum of their stones, and that if we climb high enough and circle long enough, the ordinary world might part for a moment and let us glimpse what lies on the other side.